All right, so you guys don't know this, but you signed up for karaoke this morning. Hope you're ready. All right, we got some folks excited about that. That's great. I do want to give you a heads up that there's absolutely no pressure on me to not screw this up, because Kat definitely didn't say before I got up on stage that if I don't do a good job today, she's going to have my boss have me fired. So all I'm saying is be generous. Be generous. We're really, really excited to have you guys here today and joining us for JNUC. And I've got my friends Dan and Kat here to talk about ZTNA this morning. Before we get into that, though, I do want to just address one housekeeping item that is a little bit different than years past with JNUC sessions. Can I get a show of hands real quick of folks who have the JNUC app on their phone? Okay, great. Every hand should be up. All Q&A, whether you're sitting in this room or out in TV land, come. Oh, Dan, that's so sweet. I'm not sure how to handle that one. So Q&A is going to be submitted through the JNUC app. If you go to this session in your schedule, there's a Q&A section. All Q&As are going to go through there. We'll make sure to have a little bit of time for that at the end. So let's get this party going. Kat and Dan.
Let's do this. Hello. Okay. If you do have questions, we have the brilliant mind of Dan Lawrence here today, so feel free to submit them. And Dan earlier, you could tell which one of us is the extrovert. And he was trying to engage everyone earlier, and he's like, it's too quiet in here.
Yeah, you guys really are quiet, so come on, feel free.
It's a tech conference, Dan. We're all a bunch of introverts, myself included. So, but use the app. That's basically what I'm trying to get at. Use the app, and we would be very happy to connect with you. So today we're doing part fireside chat, part recipe of how to do what Dan did and to learn from Dan on how to transform an existing setup to ZeroTouch and ZTNA. So with me is Dan Lawrence. He's a senior Jamf engineer. Last year he did a session because he has actually a very strong background in Windows. So we lovingly call him PC tech guy. So for those of you though, this is really helpful and great because if you do have a very dominant Windows environment and you're trying to figure out how to do Mac, he's got experience in both. So please welcome my friend, customer partner, Dan Lawrence.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Glad to see a nice filled room out here. I am sitting next to one of the most wonderful Jamf experts, the Jamf diva, Kat Garbus. She's really kind of, we met several years ago during one of the COVID JNUCs, yep, and decided we were going to present last year, and here we are again this year, and we'll see what happens for next year in Nashville.
Nashville, I'm excited.
More country.
So let's kind of talk through, and this is totally a play on Mission Impossible. For those who don't know, Dan is a Marine, and we're also fans of missions and choosing to accept them. But when he joined MedMutual, this is the tall order that was really asked of him, and I wanted to just kind of talk through a quick overview of the landscape. This is a lot, and you had to do it all within 6 months, and really make sure that, there were both infrastructures. Your environment has both Apple supported by Jamf and Windows supported by Intune. And there were some maybe mismatches on how to make things about the same and to standardize. So anything quick you want to touch on here? Otherwise, we'll start diving into the meat and potatoes on it.
Yeah, so the list that you see there is really the tasks that I was set forth. The way it was when I got there was, well, we'll get into that. Let's roll on. Yeah, let's just go. Right. Let's jump into it.
You had a lot of things to do, 6 months to do it, but thank goodness you had the CEO buy-in for it. So
yeah.
We kind of split it up into two parts. So let's talk first about the ZeroTouch process, and then later on we'll kind of dive into the ZTNA bits. So step one.
Step one. It was when I got to MedMutual, the guy that was there first probably if not the smartest guy out there. He's definitely the smartest guy I've ever met in my life. Clinton was a fantastic resource. He had things documented. He had things set. But Clinton is we'll call him a wannabe Mac guy. He's a big Microsoft guy, and he came into Jamf kind of like how I did. He got thrown into it and said, "Hey, you've got to do this now." And Clinton did his best. And all the puzzle pieces were out there. But step one was really focusing on what was out there, and research into the policies, into the profiles, what was out there, what needed to be fine-tuned, what needed to be erased and started over. But the documentation that was out there, we've improved upon it, but it was really just seeing what we had and where we wanted to go. And that first step kind of gave us both of, how are we going to get there?
Yeah, and I think the one thing, can we hear me all right? We're good? All right, we're good. So I would say the one thing too is just kind of taking inventory of everything is maybe the simplest way to put it. Like if we're saying, what's maybe being done on the Windows side, what do we want to do on the Apple side of things, what processes do we have in place? So when we think about what you found after taking kind of inventory, documenting, further documenting, answering your own questions, really, this was the current setup. Let's unpack that a bit. There were some things missing.
Yeah, and no offense to Clinton, but as I've been born again into the Mac world, I was able to see what really needed to happen. The policies, the profiles, the configuration steps, I'd like to think of them as puzzle pieces, right? And while the puzzle pieces were out there, kind of just put on the desk in a unneat manner, they were working, but they needed some fine tuning. And as Kent mentioned earlier, one of the driving forces was that our CEO was a big Mac guy. He came from the Cleveland Clinic and he wanted his Macs to work. One of the biggest first steps was bringing in Jamf Connect, and we're going to get to that here in a second. But to know what the end goal needed to be, I was able to dig in and get these kind of, maybe not put them together, but put them in the right order, or at least figure out in what corner they should belong in.
I want to touch on a few of the things that people are seeing on the slides, like reporting inconsistencies. Like, what were some things you wanted to have info on, but you didn't quite have that was important to you as you were starting to think about ZeroTouch and creating a standardization?
So one of the big things that we see still to this day is that we don't have modern auth within Jamf to get that reporting policy. I know I'm not the only one out there waiting for this, but it's really something the end customers are really hoping for, so we can get the reporting that we actually need.
Yeah.
As it stands now, if we want to report, we have to dig in, we have to hit the export to CSV and do a manual reporting. Nothing we can do about that. Our security team, as they should, have a very firm hand on what they will allow and what they won't allow. And modern auth is something that we should have at this point, but we're getting there. That's probably the biggest one that that we saw.
Okay, let's kind of continue on and start figuring out really some of these additional discoveries. So when you took inventory, right, started to kind of see what the lay of the land was, anything here that stands out to you, especially when I talk about like even some of the service team processes. We always say, with Jamf, we can help streamline things. I definitely want you to touch on that. But the testing, no testing, that sounds terrifying to me. So I would love for you to unpack some of these.
There was testing involved, and again, it just wasn't defined. The Apple environment was not a robustly defined area that MedMutual needed was at, and that's why they brought me in. It was to get there, and the testing was done on a few IT machines and put out there, and without the knowledge that I had, some of the testing that did go out needed to be done more.
Yeah.
So what I did it was, I worked a lot. With a Windows background, everybody was, I'm sure, is familiar with their testing rings, and that's what I based my pilots off of. I think that's on the next slide too. So I'll stop there and let you move on.
We can actually just move on. Let's unpack it a bit. So, this is really this. If we were to say at a high level, the steps to get to ZeroTouch. First step is really Apple Business Manager, I would say.
Absolutely, and our business manager guy, Mike, he was phenomenal. Has been. He was. I met him at my introduction to Jamf and Apple several years ago, and he was able to create our Apple Store, get our Apple Business Manager account up and running through our processes and through Apple's processes. We were able to get the ABM set up. And I really want to touch on this a bit because this is a very important step, especially if you're going to get into pre-stage enrollment. With the Apple Business Manager, you set up your vendor links within ABM. That serial number, when you buy it or when your purchasing department buys it, it goes into ABM. You set up the link between Jamf and ABM, and it populates already into Jamf. Once that serial number is in there, added into the all new devices, get attached to your pre-stage, and it's ready. So you don't have that chance of a lost device or a missing system because the serial number is already within your Jamf instance. And once you have that pre-stage enrollment built and the enrollment methodology comes up, if you don't have the proper authentication to get in and get that started, you can wipe the device as many times as you want. You're still going to get that prompt because it's already attached to you.
And I like pointing this out, especially for those who maybe are more familiar with the Windows side of things. This is very unique to Apple, right? So there may be automated processes on the Windows side that we're trying to mirror, but this is what really helps accelerate that on the Apple side of things. And then, of course, you're connecting to an IDP, in this case, Azure. And then you're using the entire suite, which is really great because Sam Johnson announced that everyone attending, if you're not already using it, will have access to create a trusted access, which we'll touch on at the end. Anything, I guess, you wanted to touch on with using the entire suite?
Yeah. I'm sure I sound like a broken record at this point, but Jamf is absolutely the best way to manage your Mac devices. When I got to MedMutual, it was Jamf Pro, and we had Jamf Connect. And when we brought in the Jamf Business Plan, which includes the Jamf Protect and the Zero Trust, it opened up the future possibilities of getting to Zero Touch and ZTNA. And ZTNA is, it's like the Jetsons, you're ready for that flying car. Going from Flintstones to George Jetson, that's where you want to be. So having the full suite available has just, it's wonderful to look at and get into that, that mentality.
How did things around like Radar, I think, was that helpful for your security team, especially like those types of layers?
So I've gotten into the Radar just a bit. The primary focus was to bring the Jamf instance and get it stable and get to Zero Touch. Yeah. We are at the end of our Zero Touch at this point. We are able to, I'll get there. But yeah, we have Jamf Radar is there. I've messed with it. I've gotten into it. But when we start talking about the other teams that we are necessary, and I think that's the next slide. We can probably just go on. One of the keys that I found, especially at MedMutual, was the teamwork. And I sit on a team of engineers who are absolutely a delight to work with. Everybody is so professional and experienced. We have a great time. We're able to joke around, mess around, but we also get the work done. But it's not just our team either, because in our security team, when I first got to MedMutual, it was, be careful with security. All they do is say no. They 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 say no. Well, I'm a Marine, okay? You want to say no? I'm just going to come and ask again and again. So I talked with our security director, And she was absolutely a joy to work with. I sat down with her for probably a half hour, 45 minutes, and letting her know where we were at with current situation and how I didn't want to break any rules with security. I mean, I just wanted to make the Macs run the way the Windows devices were run with the same guidelines that were already in place.
Yeah.
That was on, I think, my very first day in the office, maybe the second. The following week, I was getting a cup of coffee, and I ran into the director of cloud, and Todd, hey, I'm Todd. Oh, hey, I just started BSing a little bit. And it turns out this guy was somebody I needed to talk to that day anyways. And, working with the managers of the different teams between security and cloud and on-prem and network and the service desk, I was able to build a relationship with these folks and get their buy-in, which was obviously very important to get this running, because if you don't have that buy-in from them, they're going to go with the old school mentality where, hey, Macs suck, Macs are this, we are Windows, yay, Windows, boo, Macs. And you still get it every once in a while, I'm sure everybody else gets it too, but if you're fighting the same battles, you're going to get the work done. And one of the common themes I've been hearing here, as I'm sure you guys are, is the and, okay? It's security and network. It's on-prem and cloud. It's everybody and everybody. And security, I mean, security is everybody's job. I certainly don't want to be the one that puts a configuration profile out on my Jamf instance where it's going to allow Joe user sitting behind a Mac to bring in ransomware and put our company down.
Yeah.
So I know that I have skill set limitations with what I do and what I don't do, and I want to bring in those other experts.
So I feel like I missed a step here, and I should have also added on the slide, build relationships with those you might need to include in the success of going to Zero Touch. Real quick, you can screenshot this if you like, or take a picture if you're not set up already with ABM at a high level to really help get that Zero Touch piece. ABM, as Dan said, is key. And these are really the things that you'll need to get everything going. I did want to ask you though, for the federated authentication, anything around there or the admin account stand out to you in the process of getting set up for Zero Touch through ABM?
Yes.
Okay.
The federated IDs were, they require a good deep read regarding what you can and what you can't do. You have to understand that when you do incorporate federated IDs, you are going to have to purchase or get, I mean, it's not, obviously the apps are free, but you have to get them from your Apple Business Manager instance and then populate them into your self-service account. That was the big key. But that also allows you, the administrator, to make sure you know what's being deployed and installed on your Macs. And I'm sure we've all got the same kind of developers who, hey, I need admin access to install this app. Well, hit that software request, let's make it legal. We don't need anything coming in just because you deem it's necessary.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's great advice. So let's kind of start bringing things home on the Zero Touch piece. So evaluation process. This is really kind of what you were, if we were to, again, kind of say if you wanted to replicate this, these were some of the notable changes. And then that really took you into the next piece, which is the pilot process. But when we think of determining the scopes and policies, delete and editing, I feel like that is something that maybe, especially if you already have an existing setup or you're inheriting an existing setup, just kind of editing what may not be needed or what might be conflicting. Anything in the evaluation process that stood out to you that would be helpful to anyone listening?
Don't be afraid to go back. That's probably the biggest key. Everybody screws up. I screw up all the time. Zach, you didn't hear that. I screw up all the time. I mean, you bring in configuration policy. It's what you think you wanted. Once you get into testing, it doesn't do what you wanted. Delete it and start over. The Jamf process makes it easy for you to get that in and done. I would like to go and talk on the pilot, though. Microsoft's Ring establishment was really how I developed our pilot program. I use my IT folks, the folks that have Macs. They're getting pop-ups and notifications, and I'm getting Teams messages. Hey, did you send out a profile? Hey, did you just send something out? No, it wasn't me. Must have been Jamf. Yeah, I mean, and I see those, I hear about those notifications, so I can determine if I need to hide them or not. And then our next pilot group is, yeah, I skipped one.
It's okay.
Yeah, my first pilot group is my machine. I've got my machine and a test. My second pilot group is my IT. Sorry about that, folks. But they see some of the things that I don't see. And then obviously we go out to the general public. I've got half a dozen users in each different department that we use that have a Mac, and they all get the hopefully final result of what we package and push out. We let them test it for about a week. Or longer if needed, make any changes as necessary. And once it's done, we put in our change and it goes out to the fleet.
So just to kind of recap, you're using kind of the template of the Microsoft Rings deployment and kind of made it your own is, I think, a good way to think about that, where you're taking that test or using that test for the groups, and you're starting with yourself, and then it sounds like you're expanding and then further expanding to make sure that it's really ready. So it sounds like, especially where you're at, testing before a full-on deployment is really key in the success of, I mean, not only your career,
Yeah,
but
I mean, let's take it a step
making
back.
sure things are good for everyone. Yeah.
I certainly don't want to lose my job because I screwed up. So yeah, testing has always been a key, one of the best practices you can get into. If you can test it on your own devices or on a small amount of devices, find out where you need to fine tune, make the adjustments, get that done, and roll it out again. We had a couple of the profiles that we had got pushed out a couple of weeks just to make sure they were right, and I do it again. There's nothing wrong with taking a hit from a couple of people than making your entire fleet of Macs just say, who's this guy and what is he doing?
Fair enough. Let's start diving into the ZTNA elements of it, so kind of the part two. And I'll just take a brief moment to kind of summarize it, because we hear ZTNA all the time, or people, I feel like it's become like a menu item. I'd like an order of ZTNA, and that's not quite it. So really, how NIST defines it, it's a collection of concepts and ideas designed to minimize uncertainty in enforcing accurate and least privilege per request access decisions in information systems and services of a network viewed as compromised. So if you're a pessimist, it's basically looking through the lens of a worst case scenario is how I like to think of it. So in short, you don't trust the device, you don't trust the network, you don't trust the user, and the goal is to just make it so you have that layer of security and it's over the air and accessible anywhere, and especially in today's day with hybrid work. I mean, and I can't wait for you to talk about this because you're in the office and you can work from home, and that's really key for a lot of organizations right now because I feel like we've had really a life change in all of that. So let's talk a little bit about some of the steps that really you took to get to ZTNA. And again, this is the recipe part of it, but we want to hear from you kind of the details behind all of that and kind of what you took in these steps.
So I'm going to, again, refer to my good buddy Clinton. He had the big steps, several of the big steps needed working from home already done for the Macs. I mean, we were using our VPN software, which is working flawless simply because of Clinton. So that was done. But the Protect that we really brought in, still somewhat in a pilot phase. We've got it out to several machines, a bunch of machines, not several. But it's gotten to a point where working from home, working in the office, on VPN, off VPN, there's a whole set of layers that you need to look at when going through these processes just to make sure everything works. What you're going to have access to, what you're going to need to have access to. And again, I fall back and work with your security team, with your networking team, to make sure that the end user has a minimalistic sign-on experience so they can get their job done efficiently yet securely.
That's perfect. So if we were to say the steps to create ZTNA with Jamf Connect, you leverage both Azure, Jamf Connect. Again, these are kind of the steps that you took in a summary, and enabling so they work on and off the network. I feel like that is a part a lot of people get stuck at. Anything that you maybe want to talk a bit about in that aspect that could be helpful to anyone listening?
I'm going to fall back. Any Army guys out? Any Army folks here? U.S. Army? There's the Army. My one Army joke. Ain't ready to be a Marine yet. Army of one. In the Marines, we were taught that, we are who we are, but we can't get anything done alone. And we work together as a team. Just yanking your chain on the Army, man. Working together was really the key. I said it, I'm sure I've said it 3 or 4 times already, but getting the buy-in from the other teams, focusing on what you know and what other people know in the security realm, especially with everything that's changing on a daily basis or hourly basis is what it seems anymore. And to make sure, I've got a real good guy that I work with in our security team, Nathan. He is smart as a whip, and we got him a Mac, and now he's working on it, and we're working together to make sure our Jamf Protect console is where we want it to be, so it's in line with what our Windows devices are. And I can't say it enough, the teamwork process works because you have to understand what your limitations are and what you know and what others know.
I think that's great. And then if there's any questions on the slide, we'll be going to Q&A soon. So if there's anything from the audience, feel free, a quick reminder to just submit any questions to pick Dan's brain while we got him. So these are the, I would say, outcomes, and then we'll kind of talk to where things are today. But as a whole, the service desk team, now that we've automated some things, they can maybe focus on other projects, it sounds like, and that's something I know we've, as a company, have pitched. But when you had said that to that, I was like, okay, you sound a little brainwashed by marketing, but I was really glad to hear that you were able to be like, yeah, we were able to take time out of some of those manual processes.
Yeah, when everything is complete, and that's where we stand right now. We've got Jamf Pro running like it is. We've got Jamf Protect. We've got Jamf Connect. Everything's connecting. We're using our single sign-on. We're authenticating into an Active Directory. We're able to authenticate where we need to. We've minimized the amount of logins that the end user has to see. We've brought it all together, and with that process done, we were able to build our pre-stage enrollment. And the enrollment time for the service desk was 2.5 hours to unbox a Mac, get it set up for the end user, get the programs installed, make sure it was ready for them to take it to their office, sit down, and get to work. I've got that time down to about 30 minutes right now. And the end user or the service desk can log in through our enrollment account, begin the enrollment process, get the programs, the packages, the profiles, all downloaded onto the Mac, ready for the end user. They build the user, and it's ready to go in 30 minutes. And it's allowed our service desk to take that extra 90 minutes to 2 hours and do other stuff, get them back on the phones, hit desk side support. It's a lot of work that can now become available in other ways.
That's awesome. So I would say MedMutual today, where are we? Everything's pretty consistent. Things get tested, reports, ZeroTouch, and then the robust security piece, really making sure that the security layer to the Macs were added. Any final comments on where you stand today?
We're at a point now where we've got the ZeroTouch ready, and now we're looking into ZTNA, our next step. It came up a couple of weeks ago with an issue that was noticed again by Clinton, who is obviously the man. You're good, Clinton. We need to find a better solution for some of our offshore contractors, and they have personal Macs. And so it's really come about to a point where how can we get them to work within our specifications?
Yeah.
And ZTNA looks like it may be the answer, because we can put all of what we have in through Jamf Radar, the policies, get ZTNA pushed out to their BYOD devices, and they have a secure way of working wherever they're at.
Yeah. I think the contractors piece is huge, because we're seeing a lot of that in the marketplace right now. A lot of organizations are adding contractors, and it's one of those things where it's like they need access to things to do the work we've asked them to do, but kind of going back to, I don't trust the user, I don't trust the network, I don't trust the device. So it's great that you're leveraging tools within Radar to really help in supporting that, or have a plan to, as you take that next step. We're going to just kind of show you real quick. This is not the MedMutual process, but it's the steps applied. So we wanted to show you kind of what this all looks like, especially if you're not doing ZeroTouch and ZTNA today. I think I might need to do one more click.
I think so.
Okay, so if this is a brand new Mac powered on, it's going to have Jamf Pro pre-stage enrollments, Apple Business Manager already set up. The user will turn the computer on, select the language, and then it's already talking to Jamf Pro. And we see some customizations here within Jamf Pro coming down of how to use things, and if anything. This is the first touch point where we see Jamf Connect in action, authenticating the user, making sure they are who they say they are. So they have to authenticate before things really start to finalize in the enrollment process to make sure the right profiles are getting captured and sent down with the proper settings. So it's doing that connection right now, remotely talking to Jamf, installing everything, and already we've once connected and authenticated. It's finishing up that initial setup piece, but then what's happening is it's asking them to authenticate again, which is great. So we already saw it talk to Azure once, but one more time, we need to really make sure you are who you say you are, which I think that's great and really speaks to that trusted access and making sure they're saying who they are twice. Now we start to see the security packages start to come down. It's informing them of some of the things we are. We see Jamf Protect. So the point I'm trying to make here, we see the profiles getting captured, everything's pre-installed, and we see it's sped up a little bit, but we see this enrollment and setup process and security happening quickly, and they're already at the home screen. So that's really impressive. That's my hope for you, and this is kind of what they're doing, just not their exact one, but we wanted to show what's possible today. So if you're not doing these things, or you're like, oh, we didn't realize we can have Azure integrate right away, we can do that, and here's how. So this came up quite a bit in the opening keynote, but just kind of a reminder of all the elements of what make up Zero Trust and trusted access. And of course, Dan is leveraging pretty much everything here. And as Sam Johnson mentioned, each of you will be leveraging that and have access to everything post that. So if you have any questions, I'm going to turn it back to Patrick. We really want to thank everyone for listening in, and we will now take questions from the floor and online.
Okay. Thank you, by the way, guys. We've got a boatload of questions, actually. So we're going to try to get through as many of these as we possibly can. So let's start with first one here. Having walked into a new to you environment, what was the biggest technical challenge you faced, and how did you overcome it?
Probably just defining the policies and procedures, or the policies and the profiles that were out there, seeing what each of them did, trying to make sure they made sense into a point where we wanted to roll forward with them, or if they were unneeded, or if they needed to be redefined.
Okay. Okay, you know what I've learned over the years? A lot of this stuff is also, it depends, right? Like, well, a lot of it.
And it really does.
It's the most IT answer ever.
And it also depends on what kind of instance you're walking into. I mean, just because I came into it and saw what needed to be done didn't mean it was the right way. It was my way, and I had to get my management approval. I had to get buy-in for it too, because, you know, if I'm saying it's one way and my boss saying, you know, you're out of your mind, well, I'm going to have to convince him, or he's going to have to convince me. We've got to find the best way is really what it is.
Okay, awesome. Next up here, do you have details on how and what exactly you set up for Jamf Connect to work with ZTNA, and do you have it documented somewhere?
So we're not using ZTNA at this time. We are moving towards ZTNA. Right now we're at a ZeroTouch. How do we have Jamf Connect set up? Of course it's documented. I'm just not very, it's set up in through our Azure instance, and we authenticate through that. I guess I'm not really.
I think like just reading into this a little bit, I think there's probably a gap we need to address with how to set it up. So that's going to fall on us as Jamf. That's kind of the way I'm reading this question.
So I will say this on Jamf. At one of my prior employers, the Jamf Connect that we brought in was not done by a jump start. The tech that Jamf assigned to us was, here do this, here do this, here do this, here do this, and went away. And the Jamf Connect experience there was not as great as it could have been. When I came into MedMutual, the Jamf Connect process was pre-built, functioning, but needed several fine-tuning corrections to make it work. So A, our CEO would be happy, and B, everybody else would have that same single sign-on experience, and that's what we went to. And it's really the Jamf Connect experience is phenomenal when it's working the way you want it to. But the way I have it profiled out doesn't mean you're gonna use it the same way. I mean, we use Azure. There's definitely other single sign-ins. So yeah, I mean, you've got to determine what's best for you and how you want it to look.
Hey, Kat, just quick question on that. Do you think it's safe to say, like, for this particular question, best thing to do is if you're a partner, talk to your channel account manager, so we can align resources, and if we're a traditional customer, just reach out to your Jamf point of contact. And
yeah, I think like it just sounds like how do we set up Jamf Connect and ZTNA is basically it. If I understand the heart of it.
That's kind of what I'm getting out of it. Yeah.
So I mean, we do have the self documentation for it online. If you wanted to do kind of your own self onboarding, that is a technical document that's step by step. And there's a lot of variables to like what Dan said. Like they're using it, but it just depends on the variable. So it'll show you like the token exchange with Azure, and it'll tell you to do those types of things. And it depends on your IDP. Some people are using Okta. Some people are, they're not using Azure. Some people are using other solutions too. So there's going to be some modifications there, but there are self onboardings to go through the process yourself. And then of course, adding those additional layers like MFA, right? So you need to add that in addition to help create that zero trust ZTNA elements. That is documented, but there's again a lot of variables. So I would say start there. And if you're really stuck and you're just like, I don't want to screw this up, then yes, like, we do have onboardings available. We do have professional services. Several of our partners have done this time and time again for various different options. So there's options available if you're truly stuck, and we've got ways to help people get it going, and then on your merry way, and you can take over from there.
How many times did you get a text? Kat, I need help!
Just a few.
Okay, good stuff. Okay, question from Brennan. Thank you, Brennan. In getting Jamf Connect set up, we've had some intermittent issues. Our AD environment is hybrid, and while we have Azure AD and Okta connected to Jamf Connect, the source of truth is still our local domain controllers, and that means that we have to have a VPN connection for some operations, for example, password change. If we run into this issue, how do we tackle it?
Are they binding? It sounds like
it sounds like they're binding.
It sounds like they're binding.
That's kind of what it sounds like to me too.
Okay,
Stop binding.
Yeah,
Stop
I was
binding.
gonna say.
That was gonna be my advice too.
I was gonna say it sounds like I'm binding, but I don't want to tell you those exact words. So I think if I understand what I just heard, if you're binding, don't bind, because you're gonna have those lockouts and a lot of problems there. And I know people are like, I've been told I have to bind, that it's an archaic piece, and it's a Windows process. So I always say to people that you're doing something that because you don't know, like you're just going by what you know. So that's to me a Windows process being applied to the Mac, and you're having a bad time.
Brendan, if you're here, what we ended up doing was we unbound our devices and used Jamf Connect to authenticate. When you use Jamf Connect, you bypass that binding need, and you still have the resources that you needed available when you use Jamf Connect.
Yeah, so I guess to further add to that, it's going to alleviate those problems. So before I joined Jamf, I worked for a managed service provider. So what would happen is for accounts that were binding and we were co-working with their IT teams, anytime there was a password change, everyone was locked out, and then people were calling crying because they had deadlines and they had no way of doing their job, and now we're spending hours to just manually troubleshoot something. So with Jamf Connect, it'll do the authentication piece. It'll also help prevent those lockouts, and it'll recognize, because it's kind of translating that Windows process to the Mac. It's kind of saying, oh, hang on a second, password changed. Type in the old one, type in the new one, have a nice day, and that's it. So I think that's really helpful and key there.
Okay, good stuff. Good stuff. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we've got time for maybe one or two more. So what do you do to audit and remediate devices that don't successfully enroll? For example, users somehow skipped the remote management step of setup assistant, or has lost connection during the enrollment, and some of the pre-staged packages, scripts, and profiles didn't get installed.
So I'd love to be able to tell you that we never run into this, but it's few and far between after we've gone into pre-staged enrollment. I did end up rebuilding my PSE for a time simply because it wasn't working, and like the person said, we found that on an old PSE build, the Mac would come up. It wouldn't have the Jamf binaries. It wouldn't have the MDM profile, and it was only showing in the Jamf instance as a PSE with our computer name. And it got to a point where I had unselected everything. I wasn't installing packages, and it was still failing. So I deleted the PSE. I rebuilt it from scratch, tested it on a few, tested on the same machine probably half a dozen times. And then once I was, wow, I just lost my, once I was, once I knew that it was fixed.
It's a long week, it's okay.
Yeah, once I knew it was fixed, I was able to push it out again. One of the best things about running the pre-stage enrollment is it's fast. I mean, it is 20, 30 minutes by the time you start that enrollment process till you get those packages and profiles installed. It is done.
Cool.
Nice, nice. I don't think we have enough time to get to the next question. And there's plenty of other questions that we didn't have time to get to either. If folks in the audience or joining from TV land want to reach y'all, what's the best way to do that?
So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm in Slack. Dan Law 777 is a good way to get in touch with me, either on Slack or on, I don't think that one's on LinkedIn, but Dan Law and 37s, and chances are you're going to find me.
ket.garbus@jamf.com. I don't mind getting emails, and we know how to find each other rather quickly.
Yep. Okay. Cool. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Let's everybody give a round of applause for Dan and Kat, and enjoy the rest of JNUC.